Hi, guys. Welcome to Northpointe Plus. We are at episode 107. My name is Jenna Dufresne. I am the children's minister here at Northpointe Community Church. And this is Jake Howard. How are you doing?
It was quite the intro right there. I felt like we were getting ready to go on a game show. I got to like spin a wheel or answer a trivia question right there. But I'm good.
You're doing good.
I'm good. Yeah.
How's your little one doing?
She's good. She's sleeping whenever she wants. Doesn't matter if it's when we want. But she sleeps whenever she wants. We got a thing with our middle kiddo who doesn't sleep through the night either. So at some point in time, I stay up late with the youngest, and then I pass her off to Ash. And then when the middle one wakes up and is a little fussy, I'll go in and be with her a little bit more. So I barely ever sleep in my own bed. I am snoozing on a couch holding a baby in the safe manner. I'll wear that Lila baby, so she'll be in there sometimes. Or I'm sleeping on a little mattress thing next to our middle kiddo and trying to get her down there. And she's getting better. The middle one is getting better. The infant is an infant. So it's going to be what it's going to be.
She's going to sleep. She's going to cry.
Yeah, she's going to do what she's going to do.
What's been your favorite memory so far of seeing Josie and Addie interacting?
Yeah, with the baby.
Yeah.
They just love her so stinking much. And I never knew coming in, are they going to feel competition with somebody else in the house a little bit more? And then no, they've just mama birded and put her under the wing. And so they always say, I want to see her face. I want to see her eyes.
Aww.
They just really are enthralled whenever she's awake. And then if you're wearing her and she's awake, you've got two other ones that are right here on you. And you're like, what? I have no personal space. But yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So they love her. They're great big sisters. So
That's so good.
Yeah.
I know you mentioned Ash a little bit in your sermon this Sunday, so give us a little recap of what you taught about this Sunday and some of your favorite points.
Yeah. So we are continuing our series here through the book of Acts, Blueprints, where we are just kind of laying out what is the blueprint of the early church and what are the things that they did. And so we picked up where we left off last week. Last week we ended with Paul's conclusion of his talk after Pentecost, and at the church grew at that point in time. 3,000 people went from 120 to over 3,000 people in one day. And so then it was hey, so then what do they do actually now that you actually kind of have this fairly large entity over one day? What do they do? And there's a leadership hierarchy, I think, that gets established pretty quickly on some stuff there, obviously with the apostles who have been with Jesus. And so, which is important because I think that just shows us the four things that were kind of what we call the nervous system of the church. And we said the nervous system because these are the things that made it function, the things that made the church work when they gathered together, and that if one of these was out of kilter, it'd be like having a problem in your physical nervous system. You'd recognize there would be signs, there would be pain, there'd be numbness, those kinds of things. And we said those four things were, or the Bible, I should say, says those four things were devoted to the apostles' teachings, fellowship, breaking of bread, and prayer. And that they had those four things is kind of the crux. Now, obviously, they did other things as a church, here or there, but those were kind of the core components of it. And I think it's still the blueprint for us today to say, hey, as a church body, these are four healthy components that when something's out of whack in these four, we're going to feel it as a church. We're going to know it as a church. And we can always go back to those and say, hey, are we accomplishing these four things really well? So that's about it.
Yeah, what would you say defines what the church is? Is it a building? Is it Christians? Is it just singular me? What is the church?
Yeah, what is the church? The church is not a building. The church, when they first met here, the first century, they did meet some at buildings. They met in people's homes, right? They also went to temple, so religious places of worship, and gathered and would teach and would have community and all of those things. But the church has never been about a place. The church has always been a family. It's people. The Bible tells us that when we recognize Jesus as Lord and Savior, we are adopted into that family. And so that makes us more than just a club. It makes us more than just a building or those things. It makes us a community of people who have been changed by Jesus, who are committed to the mission of Jesus, and working to spread the love of Jesus into the world. We're disciples in that manner. And so that's kind of what the early church family was. That's what we are today. It's easy to think, even when we talk about, we go to church on Sunday, right? We always refer to that. And it's a habit I would desperately love to break, but it's years instilled even in me to be able to say, hey, we go to church instead of we're going to the church building or something like that. But so we kind of use the terms, I think, at least in English, interchangeably. But at the core, what the Bible means by a church is definitely not a building. It's a people.
So, saying it's not a building, does that mean I don't have to go to church to be a Christian. Because, I mean, technically, the church is in me. I am a Christian. So do I have to go to church on a Sunday? Do I have to go to the church building to be a Christian?
Well, considering you are work here, if you don't, you'll probably lose your job. Like, let's just go ahead and put that out. Rick's not here right now or in the room.
I go to church.
But I would say if you stop showing up on Sundays, you would probably lose your job. So for you, absolutely.
Absolutely go.
For me, absolutely as well. But for everybody else, I would also argue absolutely too, right? And this is a thing we hear a lot from all over the place. So people talk about this idea. I don't have to go to church to be a Christian. I love Jesus. I pray. I read the Bible. I even give. Like, I don't actually have to go to a place or be with other people to be a Christ follower. I can study on my own. I have my own faith, all of those things. I would argue and say that's a less than at best argument. And I would say it's not biblical to actually say that, like to say, oh, you know, as long as I have Jesus, I don't have to go to a church. That's not what the Bible teaches. That's not true. The Bible does say that we need community. And we see that here in Acts 2, that they were committed to the apostles' teachings and to fellowship, to being together. It's, you know, if you wanted to do church as a solo sport and you just wanted to say, no, I'm going to be on my own. I'll go when I want to go to church. I'll not go when I don't feel like it, or when the weather's nice, or when the weather's bad, or whenever. Like, you know, when the weather is mediocre, I will be at church. You know, and the sports aren't on. Whatever it is, like, you know, you make that decision. You're gonna have a less than or a lack of. You've got a lack of help because you don't have that community. You don't have those relationships that you've poured into. A lack of protection and honesty for people to come up and say, hey, I think what you're doing here is going to lead to some destruction in your life. You've got a lack of care from other people in the world that are going to be there. You have the lack of ability to even use your own gifts and abilities. God has instilled each and every one of us uniquely with desires and passions and skill sets that we add to the church, that we are to bring to the church, that the church is less than when we aren't using those kinds of things. So not only is you not being at church hurting yourself because you're missing out on that from others, but you're also not able to give to that too. And so that's going to hurt you. Like it's going to just, I mean, it's not just going to hurt you, it's going to hurt the church. You're hurting other people by those kinds of things because it wasn't intended to be that way. So I don't think the argument ever works to say, oh, I don't have to go to church to be a Christ follower. No, as a Christ follower, you're a part of something. And to say I don't have to gather with my family, like, man, that's dysfunctional. That's like saying, hey, cool, I don't have to be around my daughters to be a dad. Like, I'm technically a dad.
Right.
Yeah, no, I'd be an absent father and a really bad dad, right? And it's going to have an effect on me, and it's going to have an effect on them because I'm destroying that family unit. So I think there's, you know, some comparisons, some ideas there as well.
Yeah, so I wasn't raised, you know, going to church. My family would consider themselves Christians, and to this day, I'll
Cheesters? We guess Cheesters? Christmas and Easter?
Oh, not even that.
Not even Cheester?
Not even that.
Oh, man.
We were a VBS only family.
VBS babysitting. Yes.
Exactly. That's what.
Yeah, the drop off. I love it.
We will happily tell you that.
Yeah, for sure.
It was good for that. But so even to this day, my grandma will tell me, like, you do not have to go to church to be a Christian. So my family, they don't go to church, but they all will say that they are Christians. And, you know, as, you know, I don't live in DeWitt, you know, I'm interacting with a lot more non-Christians, a lot of people who grew up in church.
There's non-Christians in DeWitt too, just so you know.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. I just don't come up here very much. But, and so a lot of what I'm seeing from just the younger people, they grew up in church and they got really hurt by church. What would you say to the person who, you know, they want to know Jesus, they love Jesus, but they don't really like Christians? How would you encourage them to say, hey, like, come back and be in fellowship with us? What would you say to them?
So am I talking to people who are believers or non-believers, like people who proclaim Jesus as Lord, or people that don't? Like,
both,
I think. A little bit of a distinction there.
Yeah, I would go first with the people that grew up when they were little.
Oh, those were churched as young and then kind of fell away from it a little bit.
Got hurt,
I get that. And that's a fairly common thing, right? Like, we should look at statistics. I think Barna Group, last I saw, had put out the statistic that says a vast majority, there's a lot, I won't say majority, but a lot of people that would fall off after high school that maybe were part of youth group. They would fall off, but then they would come back when they had kids. And they would start to come back to church. It was kind of that single age or newly married age, you know, in your 20s. By the time you're getting in your 30s, like, it began to change for you a little bit. Which there's a lot of life situations that's understandable on those kinds of things of why I think that happens. But the reality is, once again, church is family. Family is messy.
Yeah.
Like that's the truth of the matter, you know. The difference in some ways is it feels like, you know, if I have issues in my family, they're still going to be my family. I don't get to just drive down the street to a new family and like walk into like family dinner on a Thursday and be like, you are now my people. And we can do that in church a lot easier. I do think there are those that maybe step out and leave one church and go to another for fantastically good reasons. Right. And I think there are those that do that because they don't want to deal with the pains or conflicts that comes with being a part of a church family. Yeah. And then they go to another church. It seems really good for a while. And then they have pain and conflict that comes with being a part of a church family. Like it's going to be messy. The church is made up of broken people, and so there's going to be broken pieces that we have to mend together and put together. Jesus had 12 followers all around him for 3 years, and one of them betrayed him, and Peter denied him, and everybody ran and hid when they needed him or fell asleep when he asked them to pray. They had little faith left and right. They always asked questions that Jesus was going, that's not the right question, right? So like there was dysfunction even amongst the apostles, the earliest matters that were there. We know there was dysfunction in the early church as you read through the book of Acts. Dysfunction in church has not gone away, and it will not go away because it's made of broken people. Right. So my thing that I would say to that is, hey, don't give up on your church family, just like you shouldn't give up on your family. You know, and that's not to say, when I say that, like, hey, there's abuse, there's all those other things in family and church life that should not be a part of there, and are really good reasons to step away from that and find healthier places and find healthier situations. But for the most part, like, there's going to be pain because it's a family. Like, you're going to experience that. I think the beauty in that is that we can actually grow from that too. I think that we learn things like grace and forgiveness and mercy, and we learn better communication. And the church is edified as we go through these trials, we go through these struggles together. And so I think there's benefit in diving in and staying in that and dealing with it in a more biblical manner. The Bible talks about that. There's lots of principles for how to deal with issues in the church, or how to deal with relational issues and all of those kinds of things. So to me, that's always been the bigger part of that.
Yeah, like growing up with my family situation, I always saw, you know, God as a mean God and a really rude God. And I think sometimes when there is church hurt and there's some, you know, things that we're struggling with that has happened at church, and we see the broken side, I think it's so important for us to constantly remind ourselves, remind others, and read our Bibles, and we see this, that God is not the one that is like beating you down. Yeah. And while he might do things that we don't like and it's going to hurt, he's not the person that's out here, and he's not the God that's, you know, doing that. I think that's something that a lot of people are getting that got really hurt by the church and are struggling to come back, is they see God as the person who hurt them, and it's so not true. That, you know, God is perfect. But going based off of that, one of the key aspects that we have in the church is fellowship. And because of things like social media, COVID, and all these things, we're seeing a lot of what was already there of loneliness being, you know, put under, you know, a magnifying glass, and really being exposed and shown that the whole world is so lonely. You know, so tell me your thoughts about
I had a great conversation with my wife this week, because we were kind of just talking about like the need to feel a certain way that you're accomplishing or doing something, and in some ways, like we put all this undue pressure on ourselves to live that best life, or have that appearance of, whether it's the best vacation or the family that's most put together, or that you just live this interesting life. And social media has done that to us in some ways. You know, there was a point in time where even just like spending 3 hours to cook dinner for your family or something like that was just a thing that you got to do, and it was good and it was fine, and nobody argued. You were taking care of your crew, and it was a healthy thing. And now we're just so busy doing stuff, and we're constantly comparing to one another on those things. I think it has bred a lot of loneliness in there. You know, when I talk to people, I get to do some chaplaincy stuff here from time to time. Loneliness is a big deal with people, that they're just talking about always feeling by themselves, that they don't have people or good relationships, or can be open and honest. They have to put up a facade that things are good, or they're worried about being judged or dismissed or whatever it may be. man, that is harsh. You know, there's a lot of surface level relationships out there in the world, and you know, I think that part of that is once again going back to just some of the hardships that we have in church, and how I think that can be a healthy thing.
Yeah.
People don't know how to have conflict or solve problems with one another. It's very easy. Like, we get angry, we can be keyboard warriors, but when we have these disagreements on stuff, like, our thing is to get mad and to belittle or to just completely eject, but we don't work through. There's a lack of resiliency in some of that, and I think that's caused some of the loneliness too, to be a part of it. And I think the beautiful thing about what we see in the early church, and one of the core components of that nervous system being fellowship and the breaking of bread, that you have to develop relationship.
Yeah.
You know, you are with somebody. You know, I'm just not going to let anybody into my house. Like, I'm just not going to do that. You know, I have to have some sort of connection with somebody to welcome them in and to eat with them, and to be able to get to know them on another level. I get to do that all the time with what I do here at the church. You know, I had meetings last week. I have meetings this week of just having lunch with people and getting to know them a little bit more. And I love doing that. I'm either grabbing coffee, grabbing lunch, or grabbing breakfast, because there's that intentional time where you're captive. Right. So even if it's an awkward conversation or things or there's disagreements on that, like, you're captive in this moment because you got food here and you got to eat a little bit, and it helps you resolve some of those kinds of things. Man, that's why I think that the early church was even so captivating to the world around them, because they did life together. They weren't lonely. It's not to say that they didn't ever experience that emotion or that pain at times, but they had community. And so I think that having that in church is an incredibly healthy thing, that you can get that in some other areas, right? Like, you can be a part of clubs, you can be a part of that, you can have other friends, you can have good relationships. So it's not like this is only exclusive thing to church, but the principles of it happening out there are rooted in the idea of, this is what Jesus created when he created the world. When God created the world, this is what it was for that fellowship, was for that community. And so I think it's the best way to combat that is to be around people and to learn that. And once again, that's why I say, even at churches where maybe you don't fully agree on stuff, or maybe something's rubbed you the wrong way, dig in. It's only going to make those relationships better.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I love about Northpointe. You know, even as a staff, we are all, we have different opinions and different views on some theological things, and we have some really fun conversations about it. And I think that's one of my favorite parts about Northpointe, is that we are all so different.
Yeah.
And we talk about our differences. And then, but we're still able to come together and be like, we are the church together.
Yeah.
And we work together. Have you ever heard, a few years ago, I heard about this thing where it was a bunch of non-Christians. They missed church. They missed the fellowship. They missed the breaking of bread. They missed being together.
Yeah.
So then they created like a church building, and that's what they would do, and they would come together. And so I think what's funny is even non-Christians still have the longing for what God created.
Yeah.
And I think that is the best part, is, you know, God, and, you know, he talked about on Sunday, the Trinity. You know, God is 3 in 1, and it's a whole thing, and I'm still figuring out, you know, what is the Trinity and how that all
good luck with that.
Works. Yeah, I think Jenny Allen says that she has her doctorate in theology, and I think she was preaching at Life Church, and she goes, don't even ask. I don't really know. I'm still trying to figure it out after all those years of studying. But I think, you know, God was not alone.
Yeah.
And so if he isn't even alone, why do we think we'll survive being alone?
Sure.
Like, God is almighty here.
Right.
Like, he's in charge. You know. And I think sometimes we are like, no, I can do it by myself. And you can't. Like, when I first moved up to Michigan, there was definitely a bit where I felt very, very alone.
Oh, for sure. Even with that massive bear you have that was in your house.
He grew. He's at least close, more hitting now.
If you don't know, Jenna's got like a 400-pound dog. It's like just a bundle of fur.
He's adorable. He's so sweet.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. But, yeah, so there was a time where even with Brody, I was very, very alone in moving up to Missouri. And, like, I'm very lucky I still have college friends, but even at social media and texting them, you know, I'm able to text them just fine at any time of the day. And I was talking to somebody about how I was feeling, but it wasn't the same.
Yeah, it's good, but it's not quite
good
good
enough. But it's not it, right.
Yeah.
And I met this one friend here at Northpointe, and she came over and was helping me move and doing all these things. And for, like, the first time in a really long time, I was like, oh, I don't feel lonely. Like, I'm interacting with her and we're creating a friendship. And for the first time in a long time, I was like, I'm not alone. And I think so many times, I'm a new adult, as you
New adult.
new adult. And I think my generation loves to say, and I fall into this all the time of, we are the loneliest generation.
Yeah.
And you call me out all the time. You're like, Jenna, this is nothing new.
Yeah. Yeah, we were talking
yeah.
about that beforehand because you had mentioned that idea of like being younger, you feel like you're in the loneliest generation that's out there. And the reality is it's just your phase. It's not only, but for the lot part, it is your phase of life. Like all of us have done that. Young adult post-graduation, what am I going to do with my life? How do I connect? How do I be an adult? How do I do that? And I remember feeling like it was one of the loneliest pieces and time periods of my life, and how I was just seeking community wherever I could find it. And was successful in a few places, was not in others. But it's one of those where you're just starting to come into your own, and it's a natural thing, but it can be tough.
Oh, yeah.
It can be tough, yeah.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. What are some ways at Northpointe that somebody who is feeling alone can get connected to have fellowship?
Yeah, for sure. I think the biggest thing for us is we want to be a place that's big on groups. Circles are better than rows. You go further, faster spiritually when you're connected with other people. We love life groups. We think life groups are a huge ticket. It's not the be-all, end-all way, but we want to create avenues where people can connect with other people in those disciple-making friendships, intentional disciple-making friendships. So whether that would be through a life group, whether that's through an equip group or a connect group, if you're joining the apologetics group, if you wanted to do a Northpointe 101, if you had, there's different studies that come up. There's a women's study coming up where you can sign up for right now, all of those kinds of things. We've got men's stuff that we're behind the scenes kind of working on some different things for that right now. But it's just that recognition that like there are ways to do it. I think another thing that we don't necessarily advertise them as groups, but as a communal aspect is actually serving together in different stuff. Whether you're on a kids ministry team, there you go, Jenna. Whether you are on the tech team or you're on the band or coffee or you're just signing up to serve at like the fall event that we're going to do. Like you're going to be around other people driving towards something. It's just going to cause you to rub shoulders over some common ground. And then the key on all of those is like, man, we've got Jesus at the core of who we are and why we do those things. And I think that's a big component of it as well. So, I think there's lots of opportunities to be able to do that. I think the hardest thing for anybody is just taking that first step. Yeah. I joked on Sunday about like, hey, actually do it. Look to the person that sits next to you because you sit in the same spot every week and say hi. And if they didn't respond, brush your teeth, all that kind of stuff. But it is that idea. Like it's so easy to show up late, leave early.
Oh, yeah.
As opposed to hang out and just talk and introduce yourself. And we just don't do that a lot. And I think of all places, like churches is the best place to be able to make those connections.
Oh, yeah. I would like to say, like, don't go to church, be a part of the church.
Yeah, sure.
Even if you attend the church building and you show up late, leave early, you're still going to be alone. Just because you're sitting around people, you're still alone. Yeah. You got to create fellowship with one another. Yeah. And you see that all the time. If you ever want to see fellowship, go to the children's wing.
Oh, man, it's buzzing.
It is amazing. You just see parents and kids running around, and not parents.
Yeah, parents
are not running around.
Parents are tired.
Oh no. But and you're seeing that fellowship with one another and them talking about their lives and planning events, and I love seeing that every single Sunday at Northpointe. But so another part of the church is prayer. Yeah. We see in the Bible Jesus, is teaching us, how to pray. Yeah. And so why do you think prayer is so important for the church, and why do you think Jesus really hones in on it?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think prayer is crucial because it's communication with the living creator of all things. It's communicating with a holy God who wants to have that relationship with us, and it gives us access to him unlike any other ability that we may have. We don't have, for the longest time to get to God in the Old Testament, you had to go through a priest to be able to do it, and sacrifices and those things, consecrate yourself. And yet, because Jesus is our priest and he's already made that sacrifice, like we have a direct access to God like none other. And so the ability for us now to simply talk to our creator, the creator of the universe, and to share with him our struggles, our fears, our failures, our loves, our passions, our desires, our wants, and then just to sit in reverence of who he is and to hand that over to him and tell him that we trust him and we love him. We may not understand everything, but we know he's at the core of it. Like there's just something incredibly powerful about that relationship and that dynamic to be able to have. There's lots of different ways to pray. I mean, we were talking earlier, like what were some of the ways that you enjoyed praying, Jenna?
Oh yeah, my favorite way to pray is laying down face flat on the floor with my hands out just like this, kind of like a Superman pose.
Yeah.
And just laying there and just being so vulnerable with God, just being like, with God. Honestly, that's how my prayer time goes is, God, help a sister out. Help me out. But having that posture for me, I see it as I can't even be on my knees in front of the throne because I'm so in awe of who God is. So for me, laying down with my hands out, it's just saying like, Lord, I am fully just like surrendering to you. But, in kids ministry, the kids they're like prayer, especially with our little ones, they're not quite knowing how to pray. So
you got to teach them. Yeah, sure.
You got to teach them kind of, how to pray same way that Jesus teaches us, what do we say in prayer? So we do the little thing, you take your right hand, your left hand, and you put it together. And, for me, I think I wasn't raised in church, but I think for somebody who was raised in church, they might be like, oh, that's just how you always teach them to pray.
Yeah.
For me, it's teaching them a type of posture of prayer, and they're going to discover more and more. But is there a right way to pray, though? I mean, like, you don't close your eyes when you pray.
I don't. I've talked about that before. I don't close my eyes because I focus less. I don't know. It's like this weird thing. Not to say I don't ever get distracted because my eyes are open, but my mind will just wander and I get tired and whatever. It just doesn't work for me as well. I'm easier to engage when I hear people talking and I'm looking at what they're doing and what they're saying and connected with them and other people and how they're reacting and stuff like that. But I remember that all the time. As a little kid, bow your head, eyes closed, hands folded, and you'd always yell out like, "Oh, Susie's eyes were open." Well, how did you know? Because your eyes were open. Like that whole thing, right? As kids. I think the right way to pray is trusting with reverence. I think that's the key to it. Whether that's laying down in a prone posture, which would have put me to sleep, whether that's in your car as you're driving. I do think that's healthy at times to get away from the distractions.
Yeah.
House of three littles right now, and I feel like there's days when I'm like, I'm not sure I ever really communicated with my wife. Like, I know we talked.
Right.
Functionally, but like connected, there was a lot of crying today. So you don't always have that. But I think the ability to remove the distractions and be able to have that is a powerful thing. Not that you have to do that every time you pray, but have seasons of that, have times of that. I think we see in the Bible long prayers that Jesus had like that, short prayers. But a lot of times they were always filled with reverence for who God is and a trusting for God's provision and care and guidance and what he was working and just a submission to that. And so I think that reverence and that trust go hand in hand. I think those are there for prayer. And that's to say, like, not that you can't have questions.
Yeah.
God, what is going on? I don't understand. I'm in pain. All those things. You can ask a question with reverence and trust still at the core of it. Not questioning who God is, not questioning God's authority, but just questioning from a place of help me understand is different than saying, God, who do you think you are? Those are two different ways to getting about it. One has reverence and trust, one does not. And I would say in our prayer life, talking with the God of the universe, that's key, having that.
And you see that in the book of Psalms. With David and Solomon.
All the time.
Is what I love about David. I kind of call him my little hot mess. And my little hot mess. Because you never know what emotions he's going to have each chapter you go throughout.
He's an artist.
Oh,
An artist heart.
Oh, yeah. And what I love is in prayer, his brutal honesty with God.
Yeah. About himself.
Right. And God, right. And even when he's saying, what are you doing? I'm confused. God, why are you letting this happen? Holy, holy, holy are you, Lord. It's how he will always end it.
Yeah.
And I think for us, God already knows what we're thinking.
Sure.
So in our prayer lives, it's better to be just honest and frank with God.
Yeah.
And that's something I struggle with wholeheartedly, and sometimes my prayer life. So sometimes my prayer life is very short of like, God, you already know. I don't know the words to say.
Yeah. Which
Help me
is
out
fine.
here. Right. And, in the New Testament, we see Paul kind of talk about how, speaking to, I believe it was the Gentiles, saying, do not, repeat all the things you're saying and go on and on and on and on and on. And just repeating.
Vain repetition was
Right.
their thought. Yeah.
So what happens if our prayers are looking like that? Should they be short? Should they be long? Is it bad to repeat?
Yeah, I don't think it's bad to repeat. You have the angels in heaven at the throne of God that are just saying, holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty. So there's nothing wrong with necessarily the repetition. The other thing was vain repetition, and that was kind of a prayer practice that was going on. It has happened in history before where people just vainly repeat the same things again and again, thinking the more that I say it is what matters. Like I'm collecting points.
Manifestation almost.
Yeah.
I hear a lot. That's definitely the New Ageism.
Sure, yeah. I think manifestation is a new way of putting it, or a more common way we hear today. But I always, in my mind, and maybe this is a dumb analogy, but I think of it as like they're trying to put coin in the bank so that they can make a withdrawal at some point in time. Like if I say enough of this particular thing, whether it's, some people, if you grew up Catholic, it's your Hail Marys and those kinds of things all the time. Again, for other people, you may not be Catholic, but you've got things that you're just praying again and again. And there's a difference between pleading with a genuine heart that trusts in God and say, hey, God, I'm just talking to you about this again because I wanted to be there, versus if I keep saying it again and again and again, like I'm going to get coin in the bank that I can make a withdrawal and get what I want, as opposed to that trust of God knows what's in control. Like, God, here's what I want, but I trust you, is different than let me put coin in the bank that I can make the withdrawal to get what I want. And I think that's kind of what it talks about, some of the vain, repetitious kind of thing.
Do you think that could also go into, earlier we were talking about how the posture of prayer, do you lay down, sit in your car while you fold laundry?
Yeah.
Do you think what we say is also kind of a posture of prayer?
For sure. We are talking to our Father. We are talking to the Creator of the universe. One of the funnest ways in fiction that they ever talk about God is the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Little C.S. Lewis action there. The Aslan lion God character there, and the kids are like wanting to know about this lion, and so they ask. I think it was Mr. Beaver. This feels ridiculous to say. Is he safe?
Yeah.
And Mr. Beaver says, absolutely not. He is not safe, but he is good. And it was that idea that is the God that we are talking to. This is the all-powerful creator, but he loves us. He is good. So I think that's a posture that I try to keep in mind of who I'm talking to, who that God is, that this is the God of the universe. We are not on the same level.
Yeah.
We are nowhere near on the same level.
Oh, yeah.
But he brings himself down because he cares for me, and so he allows me. He's come to my level because he loves me, and so he allows me to commune with him. I still need to have that reverence in there and that trust in there, but it allows me to have a genuineness because of him.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. I cry.
You're feeling that one right there.
I cry every time I think about how God...
The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe.
Oh, yeah.
C.S. Lewis gets to you.
Oh, yeah. No, I just cry every time I think about how God is so loving, because I didn't grow up with a dad. So I never got to experience that.
Yeah.
So whenever I hear about, God is such a loving father, I'm like, oh. Yes,
good.
you are.
Oh, good. That's cool.
Good.
That's cool.
Oh, yeah. We could go on and on about fellowship and prayer.
We could, but we'll talk more on Sundays and do more of these podcasts.
We'll see you on Sunday. We'll see you.
Yeah. I'm trying to think. We do have a few things I think would be helpful.
Yes.
Make sure to like, share, comment, all that stuff on these videos for us, whether it's YouTube, Facebook. Our Facebook page was down one day this week on Sunday, or however many days that we missed it in there, but it's back up now, so this should be posted on there. So be sure to do all that. A couple reminders. We have the women's group signed up right here this week on there. It's all on the app. It's called It's All Under Control by Jennifer Dukes. Jennifer Dukes Lee, sorry. You can sign up for that, women, if you're looking for that community. That's a great thing. There's 4 different options. One of them has childcare during the day for stay-at-home moms or retired moms or whoever else. Like, that's a great thing to be a part of. We've also got the Fall Fun Fest coming up here, the Fall Festival. And so we can't pull this off without having people sign up to volunteer.
So is the Fall Fun Fest not like a lunch on the lawn?
Yeah,
or
it's
is it
different than lunch on the lawn. Lunch on the lawn is something we do in-house for people inside the church to make that community. Fall Fun Fest is outhouse. That sounds weird. That's probably not the best way to put that. But it's for the community. It's for your neighbors. So we want you to do two things. We want you to invite your neighbors to be a part of this and come join us. And we want you to come serve. There's 2 different shifts. They're an hour and a half each because the whole event is 3 hours. But really to just be a part to pull this off so we can tell DeWitt, North Lansing, St. John, Langsburg, anybody that'll come to be a part of this. Hey, we love you, and this is a free thing and a safe thing for you to do with your family. Come join us. Come be a part of it. So talk it up, sign up, and let's make that thing happen.
Where can you sign up? If I have questions, who do I contact?
Yeah. At any point in time with questions about anything we do at Northpointe, it's important to recognize you can always send an email to info@northpointe with an ECC.org.
Okay.
And then we can always make sure that gets to the right person who gets back in contact with you about any events, serving, connecting, life groups, whatever those kinds of things are. That's the best way to do it. Signing up for things, you can do it that way to ask questions, or everything is always on the Northpointe app. Google Play, the App Store, make sure that's downloaded. You can always find this information on there, and it's the best, quickest way to get signed up, to connect, to do all those too. So I always like to point people towards the app.
All right, perfect.
So there you go.
Well, thank you guys for watching. We hope you have a good week and see you on Sunday.